I would like, and I'd like to be able to put out this poll. So this poll for you to respond to. So just a few questions. They're yes and no answers. So do you find yourself more comfortable to speak with certain individuals than others? Do you avoid asking questions because you're not comfortable? And then the last one is, do you feel you're always getting a good understanding of what is going on in a prospective client's world? So it is anonymous. You don't have to worry about your name being attached. Not that you should feel comfortable. We're in a sharing environment here, a learning environment too. So let's see what people come back with. Give a couple more, few more seconds here to see. Give 5 more seconds. Okay. So let's see what it is that we've got here. So sharing the results. So we have, do you find yourself more comfortable to speak with certain? So we've got 38% that said yes, whereas 63 said no. And we go to the next one. Do you avoid asking certain questions because you're not comfortable? So that's great that no one is avoiding asking the questions, which is awesome. And then, do you feel you're always getting a good understanding? So the majority said yes, and just one respondent said no. So good. Thank you for sharing that. So moving on with this. So what I wanted to talk about today is the importance of communicating effectively. And when we do this really well, then so many things work better in our lives, personally and professionally. And for many of you that have come to Just Like Family from a corporate background, you may already be exposed to some of what it is that I'm going to be of what is I'm talking about today. But we thought it would be helpful if we kind of did an overall piece related to communication for the entire group. So I wanted to start with just a couple of statements and open up the dialogue, whether or not you put it into chat or just come off mute, about that everyone has their preferred way to communicate, and knowing what yours is and knowing what are the communication preferences of your clients, whether or not they are current clients or prospective clients, caregivers, staff, referral partners. Everyone has their own preferred way. And why would it be important to know what their preferred way is? Why would it be important to know what their preferred way of communication is? Just pop it into chat if that's what you're feeling comfortable with. Come off mute. Anybody want to share? I can't. Did you want to read out any of the chats that are coming in? Oops. Let's see.
Yeah. So to make sure that it gets communicated effectively. So
whatever it is. Okay. Okay. So understanding what your own way is a preferred way of communicating is really important, because when you understand your own way, then you're able to look outside of you and who it is that you're speaking to. And first of all, see if they are the same way as you, right? That's number one. And number two, it allows you, if they're not the same way, to be thinking about, okay, so, what can I do then to alter how it is that I'm communicating, right? So because we do all have our preferred way of communicating. And that actually affects how it is that we listen, right? And it also affects how we respond. So when we think about the conversations that we're having, whether or not it's prospective clients or caregivers or staff or referral partners, we've really got to put ourselves in the position of wanting to encourage that dialogue. Like we just talked about how important it is to ask questions and to actively listen to their responses. So we do want them to open up and talk. And so we want them to be more actively listening from their end, and also exchanging with us and responding to us, because we know when we do that, that we're going to connect better with them, right? Connect better with them. And whether or not it is solidifying a new client, or whether or not it's bringing someone on board to expand your team with, or whether or not it's bringing on a new caregiver, you want to be able to connect really effectively with them. So and understanding the importance of adapting one's communication style to be able to really connect with the individual that you're speaking to, so that they open up and they listen to what you're saying, will have a really positive impact on your business. And it's going to have a positive impact on your business, not only because you're going to have better relationships, right? But when we have better relationships, people stay with organizations because they like them and they trust them. People stay with organizations where they're working in that organization because they like them and they respect them. And all of this is really fostered and nurtured when there's really good communication that's happening. And, really important too because many that are on the call are have people that are part of their businesses as well, aside from caregivers. You really want everyone in your team to be really communicating effectively too, right? Because that's how you can really get a pulse about what's going on as well. So the last little point here I want to mention is that, understanding communication styles and the impact on connecting successfully throughout the client experience is through every single piece of the client experience, right from the very beginning. And that happens when we're asking the right questions, and so we can find out what's going on inside their world, but also listening to how it is that they're responding, and using that processing of how they're responding then to color how we're going to be continuing the conversation with them. Like, how are we going to adjust our style to be able to do that? So for those of you that are coming from a corporate background, or even if you didn't, you may have been exposed to the DISC concept of communicating. That's what we're going to be focusing on today, and talking about the different DISC styles. So before we get into that, I just want to start with that there is no right or wrong style. Okay, so DISC stands for D-I-S-C. There is no right D, no right I, no right S, or right C, but there is a more effective way to communicate. I think that Carla mentioned about how, we were talking about a salesperson, and do you need to be an extrovert to be a salesperson? No, you don't. Right? You just need to be a really good communicator to be an effective salesperson, right? You really need to be a good communicator to be a good leader. You really need to be a good communicator to be a good manager as well. So it is that there is no right or wrong. You just need to be a good communicator. And being a good communicator is that when we're recognizing that it's our job to adjust our style to that of our clients, right? Our clients, our caregivers, our referral partners, our staff members, and focus on their needs. So people do things for their reasons, not mine. So with good communication, we can learn more how I can help, assist, supplement, support, right? And many of you today, when you were talking about your reasons for joining Just Like Family, right? The reasons why you like being out and talking about Just Like Family, and and being that salesperson, or being that helper, or being that supporter, right? We do that even more effectively when we're communicating really well with the people that we're talking to. Good communication results in us actually becoming more productive and efficient as well, because we get results that much faster too, and in a much more joyful way too, where it's that, hey, just connected, right? And I'm sure you've had all this experience with people that you have worked with either now, in your past, but also in your relationships outside of work, because the concepts about good communication are relevant whether or not they are when you are in a professional environment or if you are in a personal environment. As a matter of fact, when you don't distinguish between the two of them and apply the good connection principles across the board, life's a lot easier. Life's a lot easier. And that we probably do a lot of it anyway, just in our personal life, because it's just been something we've always done. So we want to extend that same thing in our professional if you're currently not doing that. So people buy from people and organizations they trust. So that's another truth, right? Our job is to build that trust, and it starts with connecting and understanding the client. And I also want to use this statement and rephrase it and say, people work with organizations that they trust. Our job is to build that trust, and it starts with connecting and understanding the prospective employee, right? The prospective caregiver, the prospective team member, right? And that's also has a huge impact on loyalty. Loyalty between the individual and your organization, whether or not they are a client, a referral partner, a caregiver, staff member, et cetera. It's huge. It's huge. So there's 4 different styles of communication, 4 main styles, right? So this is what we call DISC. And so if I was to start with giving you just an overview for those of you that haven't been exposed to DISC before, the easiest way that I like to understand it and how I use it when I'm trying to determine when I'm speaking with someone, okay, what DISC style are they, is the first thing I do is I start to listen to how they're talking. And if they are talking more around tasks and results and things, then I'm immediately thinking, okay, you know, they're probably a D or a C. If they are talking more about people, then I'm thinking, okay, you know, they're probably an I or an S. So I kind of start there. So I'm listening to what it is that they're saying and what words they're using and their reference points. And then I'm kind of saying, okay, so, you know, are they talking more about people or are they talking more about things? Right. The other thing that I am listening for is whether or not they are doing more talking or whether or not they're doing more listening. If they're doing more listening, then I'm going to be thinking, okay, well, you know, if they're talking about things and they're doing more listening, then I'm thinking they're probably a C. If they are talking about, more people-oriented pieces, then, if they're doing more listening and they're not talking as much, but when they do talk, it's about people, that's when it is I'm thinking they're more like an S. Our D's and our I's on the other side, they tend to be more forthcoming in their conversation. They're going to be talking more at you, especially the D's and the I's will do that more so, whereas you'll never feel that with someone who has a C and an S, where they're going to be talking at you. They wouldn't be doing that. Generally speaking, our styles on the right with our D's and our I's tend to be more extroverted. And then generally speaking, our styles of our C and our S on the left are more introverted. So I'm going to be looking to see if they're talking more directly to me, because that's going to lead me off to my right-hand side. If they are more indirect, more to the left-hand side. If they're task-oriented, I'm thinking more C or D. If they're more people-oriented, I'm thinking S or I. But let's dive into each of these individually now. So if we start with our directors, right, and directors, which is the D in the I, they're very decisive and direct communicators, right? They're assertive. They're also opinionated. They're driven towards results, but they're very comfortable to challenge, and they're risk tolerant. So those are the main characteristics if we were to describe the director. And I'm sure just in going through this list of phrases here, characteristics, attributes, that you probably can think about a few people that are in this area that, yeah, whenever I talk to them, they really kind of get to the point. They're not socializers. They're not socializers, right? They just get right to the point. And they do have opinions. Right? They do have opinions about things, and, you know, they'll switch opinions. They will switch opinions, but they're not afraid to give their opinion about anything. So if we think about descriptors, these individuals are, you know, on the descriptors here that are listed here are your typical words. And you're going to see these words come up again because I've created a little one pager if you wanted to take that little mini disc, like just as a very, very basic assessment piece of it. So driving, ambitious, pioneering, strong-willed, determined, competitive, decisive, and venturesome. Generally speaking, their voice is strong, it's clear, it's confident, and it's fast-paced. In all the years that I've been doing discs with people, I've only ever met one D that actually had a softer voice, like very quiet voice. Most of them are very assertive when it is that they speak as well. Their body language is they use direct eye contact. They'll lean towards you in conversation too. And, you know, they're not afraid to, you know, point finger as well, because that's like a strong D. That's what it is that they will do. So if we think about then what we need to do, if we're encountering someone and, you know, you may be looking at this and you might not feel comfortable thinking about being a person that's like this, you got to put that, you got to just move that off to the side because dealing with Ds is really easy. As a matter of fact, out of all the communication styles, they're the easiest to deal with because they make the fastest decisions. They're in and they're out of there, right? So what we want to do is we want to think about, okay, so what can I do then to adapt my style? Like what can I do to work with a director? So you want to be specific, brief, and to the point, right? You want to stick to business. You want to be prepared with support material in a well-organized package. And what I mean, that's the how-to, but with all of these styles, and I'm explaining the disc one, but the next one we get into, I'm going to be encouraging you to give some feedback in terms of what you think you should do for adapting your style. But with adapting to be able to communicate with a D, what you don't want to do is talk about things that really have nothing to do with the topic of conversation that you actually are having with them, right? I mentioned a few moments ago that these individuals are not socializers, right? So asking them about what their weekend was and expecting them to respond with what it is they did on the weekend, don't bank on it. Now, that said, that is one of the questions that can help you effectively determine if they are a D style. Because if you do ask them a question, any question that has to do on the social side of things, right, whether or not it's their weekend or how their day has started, they're going to be a one-word response person, right? Fine, good. And then you just, okay, we're not going to dig any further. And you can't be offended. It's just their style. It's just their style. And as I say, one of the beautiful things about Ds is that they make decisions fast, right? They make decisions fast and they move on. So you don't want to appear and ambiguous in any way, and you can't be disorganized because they will just dismiss that as incompetency, right? So they're just going to go, wait a minute, this person doesn't really know. So being prepared to talk very efficiently with these individuals and being on point is really important. So what I'd like to ask, what bird would you associate with this style? What bird? So go ahead, put it in chat. Let's see what you come back with. I thought today I'd introduce some birds just to see, because I find that kind of helps with people remembering what kind of style is which. A crow, okay. Crow, Steve's got a crow, okay. Hawk, okay. Eagle, hey, good job, you guys. Yeah, so the eagle, right? So why have I chosen an eagle to go with being representative of the disc style? Because eagles fly on their own. Not too often you see them in a flock of other birds. They're on their own. And that often will be, and remember that because we're going to be talking about networking later on. Right, so so that's the bird that I've chosen for that. So let's move on then to our influencer style. And by the way, what you're seeing here is all part of a little a communication aid that I have that I'm going to make sure I get out to all of you. So let's move on to the I of the DISC, which are influencers. These individuals, they're outgoing, open, and friendly. They're talkative and animated. I'm sure you can see that I probably have a bit of I in me. Enthusiastic and persuasive. They're relationship oriented, and they're optimistic and trusting. They're great people to communicate with. So what's really wonderful about I's is that they have a high level of trust. So when you engage with someone that is demonstrating any of these characteristics or their attributes and how they're communicating with you, building trust with them quickly is relatively straightforward to do. And you need to do that with being open to having conversations with them. Right? So influencers are wonderful from the standpoint of, and we talked about how important having trust is. So you're going to find yourself in conversations with these individuals that they're going to be opening up and talking a lot, right? Because they're very trusting, very, very trusting. So descriptors to describe our influencer types are inspiring, magnetic, enthusiastic, persuasive, convincing, poised, optimistic, and trusting. So generally, their voice is going to be animated, friendly. They'll ramble explanations. You'll hear a lot of different, fluctuations in how it is that they're speaking as well. And they can be fairly loud. I mean, again, these are all generalizations, but just giving you a sense for what an I could be. Generally, they will smile a lot. They're emotional. That's the other thing that is very different between, if I go back into the C and the D on the top row and the S and the I on the bottom row, the C's and the D's don't emote. So you don't see emotion with them, including on their face, right? So whereas when you get into I's, especially with I's, you'll be able to see. That's why if you're going to play poker, you want to play against someone who is an I, because you will know what's in their hand. So when you're talking with a prospective client, or you're talking with a prospective referral partner or a staff member, and you see emotion that's coming and they're expressing it, high probability that they're an I, right? And they're expressive in their gestures as well. You're going to see a lot of body language, almost to the point of distraction. Really strong I, the body language can be distracting. So I started it out with the director saying, okay, so how can we best communicate with the director? But now that we are an influencer, I said that we're going to open that up. So influencer, just to remind, if you were an influencer, you're social, articulate, fluent, good at presenting, you're people-oriented, you may be talkative, could be too talkative, you like being involved, you're enthusiastic, you could be wordy, you could be disorganized in presentations, just to give you more of a flavor for around an influencer. How can you, if you are faced with an influencer, better communicate? Go ahead and pop that in the chat or take yourself off mute. Nod and listen. Yes. Yes, nod and listen. And then you also want to also actively listening with them, and then also bringing some of that back in conversation, right? Especially if what it is that they are talking about dovetails with what it is that you are wanting to talk to them about, right? Because then it really makes them connect quickly. Oh, well, geez, I just said this, and now I'm hearing Eloise say that, and that's exactly what it is that I'm looking for. Richard, yeah, lots of questions, be directive and listen. Yeah, I mean, influencers, the challenge becomes when you're an influencer yourself and you're dealing with someone who is an influencer type. You've got to kind of ask questions, but you've got to let them talk, and you still need to be able to move forward, right? So there is that balance, because if you ask, you've got to be selective with the questions that you're asking, because they will talk a lot, right? So, and yes, these calls can can take longer, right? Agree with them, right? Smile. Yeah, Elena, keep them on track. Yes. Yes. So, you know, and there's different approaches that you can use if you're trying to keep a prospective client on track versus a staff member on track. There are little nuances that you'd want to consider with that. Because as we know with the prospective client, we don't want to discourage them from talking. Frame conversations with time limits. Yeah, that's one of the approaches to use with staff. Is to say, you know what, I really want us to be able to find some, to have some time just to chit chat and catch up. So let's get over what it is that we've got to get through quickly. And then we've got more time to chat afterwards is one of the approaches that I have found effective. So let's move over then to adapting your style. So you want to provide a warm and friendly environment, right? You don't want to deal with a lot of details, right? That's one of the reasons why, especially after a conversation with an I, you might want to follow that up with an email, with a summarized email to summarize what the key points were. One of the things to do with an I is asking them feeling questions. And that's where it's different from a D. A D, you're going to ask them thinking questions, and an I, you're going to be asking feeling questions. And that is just simply with a D would be, you know, what do you think about versus how do you feel about? Right? That's the difference. So a D versus an I, you're going to use feeling type of questions versus a D where you're going to ask thinking kind of questions. What can cause tension for an I? Being curt, short, tight-lipped, non-expressive, right? You controlling the conversation, you got to let them control the conversation. And if you're really focused on a regimented, well, we talk about this first, then this, then that, then in order, and focusing on facts and figures, that can really turn off an I as well, right? So just bear that in mind. So if we went over to determining what kind of bird, what bird would you associate with the influencer style, communication style? What bird? Pop that into the chat. See what we got. A robin, a raven. What else have we got? A yellow rumped warbler. What on earth? Okay, a big bird, Sesame Street. Stephanie, you got it. Stephanie got it. So this is, I'm here. Right, the influencer, I'm here, right, in all their enthusiasm, right, in all their enthusiasm. You know, if I was to think about a personality that would be indicative of the influencer style would be like Oprah Winfrey, right? She would be very close to that. So, and I'm sure we could think about a few D personalities as well. with who would be D-like, but an I would be Oprah. So, okay, so let's move over to our steady relators. So these individuals are also people focused, just like the I's, right? They're more people focused. Steady relators are always relaxed and calm. You know, they ask and listen carefully, right? And they don't come right out and ask directly, right? They'll wait. Right. So one of the things that's important and differentiating between the steady relator and the director, because those are polar opposites in communication styles, is the director won't wait. They'll just pop and ask the question, whereas the steady relator are going to wait to ask questions. Right. So that's one of the things when we are doing a phone call with someone and we're feeling that there's some hesitancy. One of the strategies that you can use is to let them know that at any point, if they have questions during the assessment as well, is, you know, please feel comfortable to bring them forward. You never have to say that to a D because they're just going to come right out and ask. So these steady relators are also very patient and support oriented. They inquire about specifics. Steady relators also, because they're people focused, really care about what other people think, right, and have said, right? So they are, so that's why having good testimonials and referrals are good to have as well with these individuals. And whether or not they actually will call them, probably not. but just knowing and hearing what those are would be enough. And they are very friendly and easygoing. So very different body language, right? So the director, as I mentioned, will be leaning forward in conversation, whereas your steady relator are more leaning back, like even with crossing their arms. And some people read crossing their arms as being they're checked out, but steady relators cross their arms, they're relaxed because that's just what they like to do. So don't also assume on body language without confirming some of the other descriptors or attributes that I've brought forward. So relaxed, passive, patient, possessive, predictable, consistent, steady, stable. These are all good descriptors to use. Generally, S's are more soft-spoken, but they have warm tone to their voice. Body language, you'll see some body language, but not anywhere near as expressive as the eyes are. And I put non-emotional with a little asterisk because I just mentioned a few moments ago that our S's and I's they emote more. The S's are non-emotional until they trust you, right? So their journey on trusting you is a little different because they need assurances, right? They need that, hey, that you're an okay person. You work for an okay organization, right? That these things matter to them. But then once you open up, once they feel that they can trust you, you will start to see them emote and be more expressive. So our steady relators, how can we best communicate with a steady relator? How can we best communicate? How can we best open it up into the chat? Let's see what people put in here. How can we best with our steady relators that like a particular pace, organized and concise? Yeah, I think being organized is important. It's especially important for our next style that we're going to be talking about, which are C's, and also organization is important for D's as well. S's are very forgiving, right? So S's, if you are kind of trying to get yourself organized and need to go through a couple of things, they're actually not going to hold that against you. They're going to be very understanding because they're very patient. They're very, very patient. Stay positive, be straightforward and empathetic. Yeah, I think you've got to also be asking them for, who said it here? Dell said ask for their input, right? Right. You want to invite them for questions, right? And you may have to do that more than once in the conversation because they may, be thinking, well, I don't know if it's an okay time for me to be able to ask a question. And, I don't want to interrupt this person because they're speaking, right? This is how S's tend to think in terms of, because they don't want to be intrusive. Right. So you want to make it then where it's a very comfortable conversation. And, one of the things that works really well with this style and with the C's, right, is giving them a brief summary in the beginning of your conversation, what topics are going to be discussed. Right. So it's like, or what the process is going to be, or what the purpose of the call is with a little bit more detail. You don't generally have to do that as much with the D and an I. I mean, just giving them top level. So, we're going to be talking about today, right? If you're talking with a D, one of the things I'd like to talk with you about today with an I, right? With an S and a C is a little different, where you want to be able to give them a little bit more of a framework on what the conversation is going to be about. And ideally, you want to do that ahead of time. So especially with our steady relator types, so that they are prepared. So if you're thinking about then, going in and doing an assessment, and you're picking up from your phone conversation that this person might be a steady relator, letting them know what are going to be the components that get discussed or covered in the in the assessment process, right? So they can be prepared. That's really important for an S and a C because they want to be prepared. They do want to be prepared. Okay, so let's move over then into adapting your style, right? Similar to an I, S's, you can begin the conversation with a personal comment. And when I say begin the conversation, I'm not just talking about verbal conversations. I'm also talking about written conversations, email conversations, text message conversations, right? All these, I'm talking about conversations, period, that you want to begin with a personal comment. And you don't want to be like, whoa. You want to be discussing at a reasonable pace, and you want to be checking in with them because they're not going to be forthcoming and telling you. So that's why you want to ask how questions, right? How are you feeling about this, right? Using feeling too, because we're into the people side of the 4 quadrants, right? Whereas I'm going to be using the thinking piece when I'm dealing with the D's and the C's. What causes tension for an S is when you rush them, right? When you're being dominating or demanding, but I don't think that would be the case from anybody that's on our call, that would be the case with any of you, and forcing them to respond quickly, right? So you don't want to do that. So sometimes people will say to me, you know, it can take sometimes longer to be communicating with an S, and it doesn't. Right? It just means that you didn't communicate effectively because you're not giving them the information or what it is that they need, the comfort level, the testimonials, you know, the personal touch for them to be able to move forward. So none of these styles take longer to communicate with. They don't. It's just how effective you are in being able to adapt your style so that you are communicating in a way that they will listen, respond, and connect to you with. All right, moving over to our next bird. What bird would you associate with the S style? Let's see what people have. Let's not bring him up. Yep, there we go. Come on, it's not showing me there we go. Oh my God, okay, whoops. A hummingbird, a tinkling, I can't even pronounce that. Oh my goodness. A budgie, a pelican. Okay. So it is the peaceful dove. You know, I'm a lover, not a fighter kind of bird, right? Because that's our S's, right? That's our S style. So let's move over to our last style, which is a compliant analyzer. So these people appear reserved and quiet. They respect process. You know, I always think about the compliant analyzers and going to IKEA. These are the individuals that would take home the box, open it up, take out the instructions, do the full inventory checklist to make sure everything's there, and then follow the instructions from start to finish. That's a compliant analyzer. Polar different from an influencer that will instead have a party and bring people over to try to put together whatever it is has been bought from IKEA. So those are the real differences between those two styles. So details and specifics are really important to the compliant analyzer. They will ask questions, but similar to an S, need to be given permission to when it is that questions can be given, right? So you want to be inviting them from the very beginning, and then also making sure at the very end that all their questions have been answered, right? So they will proceed cautiously. Out of all the communication styles, these are your pro and con people. These are people that will have done the research about Just Like Family before they will invite you into their home. Right? So these people do their homework, okay? And whether or not it's a prospective client, whether or not it is a prospective employee, they will do their homework. So descriptors, no surprise, cautious, careful, exacting, systematic, accurate, open-minded, balanced judgment, and diplomatic. Similar to S's, they have a, you know, they're quieter in volume. There's little or no modulation. That's a real difference between the C and the S, is that the C's, you don't hear a lot of modulation, almost to the point that you may feel that they're actually a little cool in how it is that they're speaking, not warm. And that's just them. It's not that they're not good people. They are very good people. It's just their chosen way of communicating. You're not going to see a lot of body language with C's. You're not going to, see a lot of any emotion, very little emotion. I always know big difference between a C and an S joining me in a meeting or a conversation, because the C will always come prepared. If it's an in-person meeting, they'll have a notepad. Right? That's how I know versus an S. Okay, so if we were to think about then how we could best communicate with a compliant analyzer type, what would you be suggesting? Let's open that up in the chat. I'm noticing that Jeff C knows his birds. Oh my goodness. Okay. So how do we communicate more effectively with someone that we've identified might be a compliant analyzer? So sharing with them the agenda for what the call is going to be about, or what the process is going to be about, is really important. The differences between a C and an S, once you've done that, because I suggested you do that for a C and an S, is when you have explained what the process is going to be, you need to stick with that process. So don't jump around. Right. So, this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be asking, and then, but whatever it is, that process or whatever agenda, whatever it is that you've outlined is going to be the framework. That's what you stick to. If you go off the rails and then go into step 5 and then back to step 2, no, you can't do that with the C. They're methodical, they're logical, they are the IKEA reader of instructions. Okay, so yes, less emotion, more facts. Absolutely. More facts is important. Direct and prepare with effective answers. Yes. Be factual, be accurate. Yeah. There's no not being, well, with any communication style, you always need to be authentic and honest with any way that you are communicating. And with the compliant analyzer, supporting that with facts is really important. Right. So, these are the kinds of individuals that they may ask you, how many clients you're working with, how many clients specifically that are similar to their particular situation. Right. So on the caregiver side, similar type of wanting to get factual answers to questions that they're asking. So having your facts is going to be really important. All right, so preparing your case in advance obviously is going to help. Sticking to business, just like D's, no socialization, right? No socialization. Be accurate and realistic. Being giddy, having jokes, being, lighthearted. No, that they don't like that way of communicating, right? And similar to S's, pushing too hard, no. But that's why outlining the process is so important, because if the process is a decision making at the end of the conversation, and they understand that that's what it is that the process is, similar with S's, you will be much more successful in moving forward, because that's the process and you're following the process, right? And similar to D's, disorganization or messy, no, they don't like that, right? So going in being well prepared is the best thing that you can do. So let's pick our final bird. What's the final bird that we would associate with our compliant analyzer style? Hey, blue heron, hawk, owl. Steve, you got it. Yeah, owl. Absolutely, the owl. That is, they are looking around, because that's what C's will do too, is that because they won't interrupt, they'll be looking around, they'll be assessing, right? And then they'll be talking afterwards, but not till they feel that it's appropriate to do so. Okay, so Carla's gonna send this out to all of you so that you have it. It'll also be in the fridge. So this is just a quick little, there's lots of DISC assessments that are out there, but this is one that I just created that's very, very basic. And if you've never had a DISC assessment done before, this is a great little mini one to be able to do and see what your style is. And then you can put in practice understanding your style more, and then being aware of these other ones. Am I dealing with, a director style? Am I dealing with an influencer style? Am I dealing with a relator style? Or am I dealing with a compliant analyzer? How do I need to adapt? Okay, you're also going to be getting this little guide, which once you've identified your style, then you can then look at, well, how can I better communicate with the other styles, including my own? So I'm going to be sending this little guide as well. So there's one if you're a director, there's one that you're an influencer, one that you're steady, one that you're compliant analyzer. So at 30,000 feet, most people will have characteristics for more than one style. So you're going to be looking for more pronounced descriptors that you're seeing. Even when you do that little mini assessment yourself, you're going to see that you're probably not all one style, but the bigger number, the bigger numerical value that you have assigned to the first is your more predominant one, and then the second one, and so on. So you want to look for those pronounced descriptors. That's why those descriptors are important as well, because you associate people with that. Oh, they're really enthusiastic. Okay, then they probably are an I, right? Or have I tendencies in them. You want to listen for tone or pace, remembering that, you know, the quicker speakers are your D's and your I's, right? In terms of right? And you've got emotional speaking versus less emotional speaking. How the population is split between 20, 35, 35 and I, right? There used to be a little bit more S's and I's, and it's kind of equaled out a little bit. Lots of rationale for that, but that's the way the population generally is right now. And you have the ability to adapt and communicate effectively. It's entirely in your hands, right? When you understand the yourself first and foremost, and then go, okay, so that's how I like communicating too. So if I find other people that are like me, then that's easy. But, you know, if I'm dealing with someone else, what are these key principles, these key communication principles that I can then incorporate in how it is that I'm going to be communicating with them? And, you know, I didn't mention this yesterday, but I'm going to mention this today and say that, you know, because we talked today about being authentic and being honest. So sometimes people say to me, well, Eloise, you know, if I'm adapting my style, aren't I being, you know, I don't think I'm being authentic. And I say to them, you know, if you were inviting someone over for dinner and they were vegetarian, would you serve them meat? Of course not, right? Are you being authentic? Absolutely. What you're being is respectful. And that's what I want us thinking about with this communication, is that when we are adapting our style, we are being respectful to the other individual because we want to communicate with them. We want to connect with them, which are all the things that we've talked about at the importance of doing really well at Just Like Family. Okay, so what am I going to start doing differently? Question for you to see what you're going to do. But while you're pondering that, the last poll that we're going to send is this one here. It's very simple. Now that we've gone through a very brief outline of the communication styles, what style do you think you are? So not me, or not Carla, or not Sarah, or not Elena. What style do you think you are? So if you want to just fill this in, and let's see what we've got coming back with. And we can compare that to the population to see, now that we know it's like 20, 35, 35, and 10. So we've got, let's give, I'm going to see 5 more seconds. And if you're not sure, you know, I do look forward, you know, do that little mini assessment, because that'll give you some insights. Okay, so not everybody responded because I only see 6. But okay, we'll end the poll. There we go. Share the results. So we've got, so 17% is a D, 50% is an I, and 33% is an S, and no C's, no C's. So we'll see what comes back with when you, for those of you that have done assessment before in a previous life, it's interesting. We do, I get this question asked as well too, is do your communication styles change? I think as we get more experience, we become more adaptable. We become more adaptable. We recognize that, you know, I can choose how it is that I am communicating, and I want to communicate more effectively. So let me figure out a better way. And as I said, when we first started, we tend to do this on the professional side, on the personal side, very naturally. right? I'm sure we all know the best way to communicate to the significant others in our lives, right? And we just need to extend those practices in the professional world if you're not already doing it. So I hope you're going to start doing something differently, or maybe fine tuning something that you already are doing. And I hope you found this helpful on what you can do to really get into their world.